My name is Suwan. I'm 80 years old, and I need to start by telling you something that might sound severe until you understand what it is actually pointing toward. Don't complain, don't argue, don't ask why. When I first encountered these three as a living practice rather than as words, I resisted all of them. Not because I thought they were wrong, because I felt them as losses. Giving up complaint felt like giving up the right to be heard. Giving up argument felt like giving up the right to be right. Giving up why felt like giving up the attempt to understand. And I valued all of those things. I had built significant parts of my identity around them. I was someone who named injustice. I was someone who held his ground in disagreement. I was someone who needed to understand the reason for things before he could accept them. None of that was without some value, but all of it over time was costing me something I could not fully see until I began to practice the alternative. It was costing me presence. It was costing me peace. And most of all, it was costing me the enormous energy that I was spending fighting with reality instead of living inside it. Maybe this title already created some resistance in you. Maybe something in you wants to argue with the premise. That resistance is worth noticing, because it is exactly the kind of inner movement this practice is designed to help you examine. Stay with me, because what I am going to share is not a teaching about becoming passive or silent or indifferent to what matters. It is a teaching about where your energy actually goes and what it actually produces when you spend it on complaining, arguing, and demanding explanations from life. I was born in northern Thailand, in circumstances that were not always fair and not always gentle. I learned early to notice when things were wrong, to name them, to resist them, to require explanations from the world about why certain things had to be the way they were. This habit had real roots. It came from real experiences of injustice and real feelings of powerlessness. And for a time, the internal narrative of complaint and argument gave me a sense of agency, a sense that I was not simply accepting what was unacceptable. But over time, as I watched what that habit actually produced in my inner life, I began to see something I did not want to see. The complaining, the arguing, and the asking why were not changing what I was complaining about, arguing with, or questioning. They were simply keeping me inside the experience of it. They were extending the duration and the intensity of my suffering, without producing the relief or the change or the understanding I believed they were pursuing. You see, there is a profound difference between naming a difficulty clearly and complaining about it persistently. There is a difference between communicating honestly in disagreement and arguing for the sake of being right. There is a difference between seeking genuine understanding and demanding that life explain itself to your satisfaction before you will accept it. The first of each pair moves forward, the second of each pair circles, and circling, repeated long enough, becomes its own kind of prison. And here's what I didn't understand then. When I complained, I was not relieving the pain, I was rehearsing it. Every repetition of the complaint deepened the neural groove of the suffering, made it more vivid, more present, more central to my experience of the moment than the actual moment deserved. The thing I was complaining about was often already over, but through complaint I was keeping it alive in me, sometimes for far longer than the original experience had lasted. The suffering I carried was not always proportional to the difficulty that had caused it. It was proportional to how much I complained about it. When I argued, I was not usually pursuing understanding. I was defending something. Sometimes something legitimate, but often something much smaller than I pretended. My position, my sense of being right, my need to have someone else acknowledge that I was right. And the energy required to defend those things was immense, far greater than the importance of what was being defended. I watched myself spend hours of inner life in arguments that resolved nothing and changed nothing. Arguments with people who were not present. Arguments with facts that were not going to change. Arguments with what had already happened, which is perhaps the most futile of all human activities. When I asked why, I was often not genuinely seeking wisdom. I was resisting what was. Why did this have to happen this way? Why did this person do this? Why is life arranged so that this kind of thing is possible? Those questions have their place when they lead somewhere, but very often they do not lead anywhere. They simply become a form of non-acceptance, a way of saying, I will not receive this until I understand why I should have to. And life, which does not explain itself to anyone, does not respond to that demand by offering explanations. It simply continues. And the person waiting for the why continues to suffer while they wait. Let me explain what the practice actually looks like from inside. Not complaining does not mean pretending that difficulty does not exist. It means choosing not to narrate difficulty to yourself and others in a way that amplifies and extends it. When something is genuinely wrong and communication will help, say what needs to be said clearly and once. Then release it. Do not return to it to feel the indignation again. Do not repeat it to people who cannot change it. Do not let it become the background noise of your inner life. Name it. Address what can be addressed. Release the rest. Not arguing does not mean abandoning honesty or refusing to hold a position. It means distinguishing between communication that moves toward something real and argument that serves only the ego's need to win or to be validated. There is a quality of inner tightening that appears when argument becomes about winning rather than understanding. Learning to recognize that tightening, to notice when the conversation has shifted from genuine exchange to defensive performance, and to step back from that shift, is the practice. It does not require agreement. It requires honesty about what the argument is actually for. Not asking why does not mean abandoning curiosity or the pursuit of understanding. It means recognizing when the question why has become a form of resistance to what is already real and cannot be changed. The event has happened, the loss has occurred, the person made the choice they made. Asking why endlessly does not undo any of that. It only keeps you in relationship to it in a way that prevents the kind of acceptance that would allow your life to move forward. There is a difference between the why that opens understanding and the why that refuses acceptance. Learning to feel that difference from the inside is the practice. You know what surprised me most? When I began to practice these three things honestly, the first thing I noticed was not peace. It was how much time I had, time that had been entirely consumed by complaint, by internal argument, by the demand for explanation. Time that was suddenly available for something else, for being genuinely present in the moment I was actually in, for noticing what was actually happening rather than what I was saying about what was happening, for bringing attention to what I could actually do rather than to what had already been done that I could not undo. What most people don't realize is that complaint, argument, and the relentless asking of why are not neutral activities. They have costs, real costs in energy, in time, in the quality of attention available for actual living. And those costs are often invisible because the activities themselves feel so natural, so justified, so much like a legitimate response to what life has brought. They feel like they are doing something, but very often what they are doing is simply preventing the kind of acceptance that would allow the next thing to become possible. This does not mean acceptance in the sense of approval. I want to be clear about this because it is frequently misunderstood. Accepting what is does not mean agreeing that it is good or right or just. It means acknowledging that it is real, that it is already here, that fighting its existence in your mind does not change its existence in the world, but does consume your capacity to respond to it wisely. Acceptance is the beginning of effective action, not the end of it. The person who has accepted a difficulty clearly is far more capable of responding to it intelligently than the person who is still spending their energy arguing with the fact that the difficulty exists. There was a particular night in my practice, many years ago now, when this became very real for me. I had been carrying a grievance for weeks. Something genuinely unfair had happened, and I had been complaining about it internally, rehearsing it, demanding internally that the universe account for why such a thing was permitted. On this particular night I was exhausted from it, truly exhausted, and in that exhaustion something relaxed enough to let a question arise that I had not been willing to hear. What is all of this effort actually producing? Not what does it feel like to be right? What is it producing? And the honest answer was nothing. It was producing nothing except the continuation of the suffering. The situation had not changed. The person responsible had not suddenly understood. The universe had not offered the explanation I demanded. Only I had changed. I had become a person who was spending every available inner moment in a conversation with an injustice that was not listening. That recognition did not resolve everything, but it broke something. Some kind of insistence, and in the space where the insistence had been, something quieter appeared. Not happiness exactly, but relief. The relief of no longer fighting something I could not win against. The relief of putting down something I had been carrying far longer than it needed to be carried. At 80 years old, I still encounter situations that would once have sent me deep into complaint, argument, and the demand for why. I still feel the initial pull of those responses, the familiar tightening, the beginning of the internal monologue. But I recognize it faster now, and I know what it costs. And that knowing, even imperfect and inconsistent, has given me back an enormous amount of the inner life that I used to spend on resistance. If these words are landing somewhere real in you today, perhaps this is the right moment to ask yourself honestly, what are you currently complaining about that repeating will not change? What are you arguing with internally that winning will not actually resolve? What why are you demanding that life explain, knowing that the explanation will not come? Those are not rhetorical questions. They are genuinely useful ones. And if you want to share something in the comments, tell me which of these 3 practices feels most difficult for you and why. Because sometimes naming the resistance is the first honest step toward releasing it.